headline is spreading across tech forums. Bill Gates furious as Lenovo ditches Windows for Linux. It sounds apocalyptic. It's dramatic, explosive, and taps into a long-running rivalry. Windows versus Linux. Before the outrage takes over, we need to slow down and understand what's happening, and why even the idea of this shift in the tech world matters. First, let's address the headline's emotional core. Bill Gates is no longer running Microsoft. He stepped down as CEO decades ago, transitioning into philanthropy and global health initiatives. So the idea that he is personally furious over OEM operating system strategy is almost certainly exaggerated, but the symbolism is powerful. For over 30 years, Windows wasn't just software. It was the default state of personal computing, the unquestioned standard. If the world's largest PC manufacturer shifts away, it's bigger than one executive's feelings. Now let's talk about Lenovo. This isn't a niche boutique laptop brand. Lenovo has been the largest PC manufacturer globally by market share for years. Millions of laptops and desktops ship with their branding every year, spanning consumer, enterprise, and education. When Lenovo changes strategy, the industry notices, suppliers, competitors, and yes, Microsoft notices. For decades, the Wintel Alliance, Windows plus Intel, defined the personal computing era. You bought a PC, it came with Windows. Not an option, not a debate, it was just there. OEMs paid licensing fees to Microsoft, pre-installed Windows, passing costs to consumers. The arrangement was stable, but stability in tech is always temporary. The rise of Linux has been slow, steady, and relentless. Unlike Windows, Linux isn't a single product owned by one corporation. At its core is the Linux kernel, originally created by Linus Torvalds. Around that kernel, companies and communities build distributions, operating systems tailored for different audiences. For a long time, Linux on the desktop was seen as enthusiast territory. It was powerful, flexible, and free, but not polished enough for mainstream OEM preinstalls. Driver compatibility could be inconsistent, commercial software support lagged. Gaming was weak. That narrative is no longer accurate in 2026. Modern Linux distributions are visually polished. Hardware support is dramatically better. Corporate backing from companies like Red Hat, Canonical, and SUSE has transformed Linux from hobbyist tool into enterprise-grade platform. Meanwhile, Microsoft has evolved. Windows is no longer the singular core of Microsoft's business. Cloud services, especially Azure and enterprise subscriptions, now dominate revenue. In fact, Microsoft even contributes to Linux and runs massive Linux workloads in Azure data centers. So if Lenovo expands Linux offerings, is that a rebellion? Or is it just market pragmatism? Let's talk about money, because that's where this story becomes interesting. Windows licensing is not free for OEMs. Each device shipped with Windows carries a cost. That cost varies depending on edition, volume agreements, and device category, but it is not zero. Linux, on the other hand, can be deployed without per-device licensing fees. That doesn't mean it's free of costs. Support, contracts, integration, and validation all cost money, but the economics are different. If Lenovo can ship certain devices with Linux and avoid Windows fees, their margins shift. If those devices sell well, the strategy scales. If customers are comfortable with browser-based workflows, dependency on Windows weakens. And that's another key change. The browser ate the operating system. For millions of users, their most used application is a web browser. Email, document editing, collaboration tools, design platforms, video conferencing, all of it happens in the cloud. Google Docs, Microsoft 365 web apps, Slack, Zoom, Figma, Notion. They don't care what kernel you're running underneath. As long as the browser works, the productivity stack works. This decoupling reduces Windows' strategic lock-in power. Now, to be clear, Lenovo has not publicly declared the complete abandonment of Windows across all product lines. That would be seismic. What we are seeing instead is expanded Linux pre-installation options across more models and regions. Historically, Linux SKUs were limited, harder to find, or available only in certain markets. Increasing visibility and normalization of Linux on mainstream hardware is the real shift. And perception matters. For decades, Linux on laptops often meant wiping Windows yourself and risking driver issues. Now, when a major OEM offers Linux as an official configuration, fully validated, fully supported, with firmware tested for compatibility, that sends a message. It says Linux is not experimental. It says Linux is commercially viable. It says Linux is not just for servers anymore. If that trend grows, Microsoft's leverage changes. However, we also need to consider Microsoft's strategy. Microsoft is no longer fighting Linux the way it did in the early 2000s. The infamous Linux is a cancer era is long gone. Today, Microsoft ships the Windows subsystem for Linux. It contributes to open source projects. It acquired GitHub. It runs Linux in Azure. The company's revenue increasingly depends on subscriptions, cloud services, AI platforms, and enterprise ecosystems, not just OEM Windows licenses. So would Lenovo offering more Linux machines devastate Microsoft? Probably not. Would it chip away at Windows' symbolic dominance? Possibly. There's also the enterprise dimension. Large corporations often standardize on Windows because of legacy applications, Active Directory, and compliance requirements. That inertia is massive. Switching thousands of endpoints to Linux isn't trivial. It requires retraining, compatibility audits, and cultural change. But there's a generational factor at play. Young developers, engineers, cybersecurity professionals, and AI researchers are often trained on Linux environments. Universities teach with Linux servers. Cloud-native development happens in Linux containers. Docker, Kubernetes, DevOps pipelines, Linux dominates those ecosystems. When those professionals buy personal machines, they may prefer Linux. Gaming used to be one of Windows' strongest moats. But projects like Proton and the Steam Deck have dramatically improved Linux gaming compatibility. That weakens another traditional barrier. Then there's privacy and control. Windows has increasingly integrated telemetry, cloud accounts, and subscription prompts. Some users resent that. Linux offers a perception and often a reality of greater user control. For privacy-conscious buyers, that's attractive. Now let's address the emotional framing again. The idea that Bill Gates would be furious implies betrayal. But the PC industry is not built on loyalty. It's built on margins and demand. Lenovo's responsibility is to shareholders and customers. If offering Linux configurations increases profitability or captures new segments, it's rational business. And here's the irony. Microsoft itself may not view expanded Linux-owned deals as catastrophic. If those same users subscribe to Microsoft 365, store data in OneDrive, or deploy workloads in Azure, Microsoft still benefits. The operating system layer is no longer the only monetization vector. The real story here is not rage. It's diversification. The PC market has matured. Growth is slower than in the 1990s and 2000s. OEMs look for differentiation. Offering Linux devices can distinguish certain product lines. It can appeal to developers. It can reduce licensing costs in price-sensitive regions. It can support government contracts where open-source mandates exist. In some countries, governments encourage or require open-source software to reduce dependency on foreign proprietary vendors. Let's also consider supply chain dynamics. The global semiconductor ecosystem has experienced volatility. Diversification reduces dependency risks. While Windows licensing isn't hardware, strategic diversification at the software layer mirrors broader risk management trends. There is also competitive pressure. If Dell and HP expand Linux offerings, Lenovo cannot ignore that segment. OEM competition often drives feature parity across brands, but we should avoid oversimplification. Windows still dominates desktop market share globally. The installed base is enormous. Enterprises rely on it. Gaming ecosystems still heavily prioritize it. Creative software like certain Adobe tools remains optimized for it. Momentum matters. At the same time, momentum can shift gradually until it feels sudden. Think about how smartphones overtook feature phones. The transition didn't happen overnight. It happened through incremental improvements, ecosystem maturation, and consumer normalization. Linux on the desktop may follow a similar arc, not explosive displacement, but steady normalization. And normalization is powerful. When average consumers walk into a store and see a Linux laptop next to a Windows laptop, not hidden, not special order, not developer edition, it changes perception. It makes Linux part of the mainstream conversation. So is this the end of Windows? No. Is it a symbolic shift in PC history, potentially? The more interesting question isn't whether Bill Gates is furious. It's whether the automatic assumption that every PC equals Windows is fading. If Windows becomes one option among several, rather than the unquestioned default, that's a historic shift. And that shift reflects broader industry changes. Cloud-first computing, cross-platform apps, open-source maturity, and diversified revenue models. In many ways, this is less about conflict and more about evolution. Microsoft evolved from a desktop software giant into a cloud and AI powerhouse. Linux evolved from a niche enthusiast kernel into the backbone of global infrastructure. Lenovo evolved from an IBM PC division acquisition into the world's largest PC manufacturer. Each player adapted. So instead of asking whether Bill Gates is furious, we should ask a more strategic question. What does the operating system mean in 2026? Is it the center of computing? Or is it just the layer that boots the browser? If it's the latter, then OEM flexibility increases. If users care more about battery life, performance, design, and price than about the OS logo, then Windows' historical lock-in weakens. But transitions are rarely absolute. Windows will likely remain dominant for years. Linux will likely continue growing steadily. Chrome OS will serve its niche. Mac OS will remain strong in its ecosystem. The future is plural, not singular. And maybe that's the real headline. The PC industry is no longer defined by one default. It's defined by choice. Lenovo offering more Linux systems doesn't mean Windows collapses tomorrow. But it does mean the monopoly mindset is over. And that, more than any imagined fury, is what makes this story worth watching.